So this news broke in terms of the description of what went on a few months back now, when Peter Mandelson was revealed to have described Jeffrey Epstein, the famous international criminal, as being his best pal in the same birthday message that Donald Trump also professed his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. The fact that this is now being covered in the BBC is probably a watershed moment, because obviously the Wall Street Journal have released the actual unredacted images of all these birthday messages to Jeffrey Epstein, ostensibly to try and take a swing at Donald Trump, because the Donald Trump one is real dodgy. It's real dodgy when they talk about like the secrets that they have together. Like, it's real dodgy. But luckily for you, luckily for us here in the UK, Ambassador to the United States Peter Mandelson is also implicated in these releases, and it's also pretty creepy as well. So, yeah, we've already seen a bunch of the pictures of him. For example, this particular picture of him with Epstein is pretty famous. There's one of them together at a birthday party. Famously, Jeffrey Epstein referred to Peter Mandelson as Petey. And you can only imagine that he was appointed as the ambassador to the United States so that him and Donald Trump could regale their times of knowing Jeffrey Epstein together. But I could not have imagined for 1 second just how bad the birthday message that Peter Mandelson gave to Jeffrey Epstein is. It's real bad, and luckily we have them to hand. Okay? Once upon a time, an intelligent, sharp-witted man they call Mysterious parachuted into my life. You would spend many hours just waiting for him to turn up, and often, no sooner were you getting used to having him around, you would suddenly be alone again, leaving you with some interesting friends to entertain instead, or just some dogs to keep you company. He wasn't always so keen on them. But then he would parachute back in, very occasionally taking you by surprise in some far-off places, or in one of his glorious homes he likes to share with his friends. Yum yum. But wherever he is in the world, he remains my best pal. Yeah, that's not creepy at all now, is it, chat? It's not creepy in the slightest, is it? As I said, I could not have imagined it would be this creepy. The specific one, the worst one, is the one where it's like... The one where it says yum yum is really the worst one. In one of his glorious homes he likes to share with his friends, yum yum. It's diabolical, isn't it? Just want to make it very, very clear. Keir Starmer, the man who ran on a platform of ending the Tory chaos and focusing on kind of probity and public service of the people in government, who said that they would only be having the highest quality candidates available, is the person who is appointing the man who is friends, or was previously friends with at the very least, one of the most notorious international criminals probably of all time, as the ambassador to the United States. I just, what the fuck are they playing at? It's beyond belief. In the words of Aaron Bastani, it's really quite extraordinary. The fact that Peter Mandelson can just get away with this stuff for so long. The BBC only is reporting on this now, and this was broken a few months back. Is one of the only famous people to publicly stay friends with Epstein after the first arrest. Jesus. Like, you'd think that if you wanted to maintain some level of electoral popularity, you wouldn't want, at the very least, to enable the conspiracy type people who would look at Mandelson getting appointed by Starmer and thinking that the Labour Party is entirely represented by people within the inner ring of all of that kind of people, right? Turns out it's mostly just Blairites anyway. It is basically the inner ring anyway. But, like, the relationships with somebody who is just conspiracy bait. Like, they're trying to win over Reform voters, remember? And Reform UK are like the mainstream conspiracy theory party. To have your appointee as an ambassador to America to be somebody with the history of Peter Mandelson, not just in terms of his kind of rat-fucking period as the fixer in the background in the Labour Party, but also literally describing Jeffrey Epstein and his best pal is, for every kind of ethical problem about this, which there are many, it's also just terrible, like, optics, too. Jesus. Apparently, the birthday book recounts a story where he took girls out on a boat and told them to strip at knife point. We picked up girls on a beach, went out on a boat. I tell them with a knife in my hand to take suits off. But Warren tells, don't worry, his name is Jeannie, he's just joking. This is Peter Mandelson's best pal, in his own words, apparently. Starmer's spokesperson talked about the special relationship and bragged about Trump's unprecedented state visit in his response to this. Of course he did. It's just like when they questioned Keir Starmer about Natalie Elphicke joining as an MP. And then they questioned him over the fact that she previously had defended her criminal husband. And then he was like, I'm delighted to welcome in Natalie Elphicke to the Labour Party.
When her husband was convicted of sexual assault, she called his victim a liar. Is this the sort of person who shares Labour values, who you want to have in the party?
I'm delighted to welcome Natalie Elphicke to the Labour Party.
And I'm just like, what are you fucking talking about? Truly the adults are in the room. This is just grown-up, sensible politics. That's what this looks like, chat. I think that this is a resigning matter, not only for Peter Mandelson, but clearly for Keir Starmer as well. Like, how can you be showing any amount of political support for somebody who is this heavily implicated in friendships with Jeffrey Epstein? This is how Wes Streeting responded to questioning about the Mandelson revelations on Sky News.
Oh, I think our ambassador has made it very clear that he deeply regrets ever having been introduced to Epstein, and frankly, given what we all now know about the way he conducted himself and the sort of appalling testimony we've heard from Epstein's victims, who would want to be associated with him, frankly.
So it doesn't lead to a change in ambassador or any consideration of that?
No, I don't think we should regard everyone as guilty by association.
Thing is right. This would be a perfectly reasonable response if it was just a fleeting relationship, if all it was that they engaged in like financial dealings together and this was proof that this was all it was, right? Perfectly reasonable to have this response if it was all that it was, right? He wrote him a birthday message describing him as his best pal and used the phrase yum yum in relationship to being friends with Jeffrey Epstein to the point where he would get invited to one of his special places, right? Special houses. What was the exact quote? Make sure I get these correct. One of his glorious homes he likes to share with his friends, yum yum, is the exact quote there, right? This goes way beyond just an association. This goes much further than just being associated at some point with Jeffrey Epstein. Guilt by association is perfectly valid to dislike when the association is nebulous. When the association is so close as to writing people birthday greetings, you describe them as your best pal. That goes a little further than just being an associate.
I think that the important thing is Epstein's victims receive justice now and the platform now to tell their stories, to receive the hearing and the justice that comes from transparency and being now able to speak out in a way that sadly they weren't able to do while Epstein was alive. And it's really important that victims are believed, that they're given.
I think it's incredible that he is weaponizing, like, talking about Jeffrey Epstein's victims to try and divert attention away from the fact that he is trying to carry favour with a government that has appointed this guy who called Epstein, international sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein, previously, in the past, his best pal, quote unquote. Or we need to think about the victims. I'm like, no, let's talk about the associates of Jeffrey Epstein for a second. That's what we're discussing here. Quite frankly, I think that if we don't at least scrutinise this, because then we don't have any evidence that Peter Mandelson did anything untoward in his relationship, right? That's what requires scrutiny, so we get to the bottom of what the relationship actually looked like in totality. No one's making any accusations at time of recording of Peter Mandelson as engaging in anything personally improper. It is the fact that the relationship was so close that means it requires investigation. Otherwise, right, the victims don't get full closure, That's the problem, right? Is that regardless of whether or not there's any hard evidence that he was engaging in anything himself, which currently we do not have any at all, right? I'm not trying to say I implicate Peter Mandelson in anything that Jeffrey Epstein did that was illegal. But what the problem is that whilst Jeffrey Epstein was mostly famous for doing these illegal things and fixing these illegal things for people, it requires scrutiny. He is the ambassador to the most powerful country in the world. He's literally the ambassador to the United States of America. It requires more scrutiny than just, I'm not going to draw guilt by association, but let's concentrate on the victims, shall we? No, Wesley, you can't just dodge the question like this.
Given the space to set out their experiences and the, the justice that was not applied to Epstein in life can at least tarnish his name in death.
Endless levels of kind of beating around the bush here. The fact that the Chris Pincher stuff was a resigning matter for Johnson, and yet Peter Mandelson stays on as ambassador. Again, Chris Pincher actually did the things. We have no evidence that Peter Mandelson did, but he was at the very least friends with somebody who did do those things. And not just, again, acquaintances, but like friends where he described him as his best pal in like a birthday letter. And talked about entertaining, interesting friends. It doesn't look good. That's all I'll say, you know? And it's really worth pointing out that all of this stuff regarding the closeness of Epstein and Mandelson was all out in the open when he was appointed as the ambassador. The pictures from the birthday party, the pictures from the shopping trip, these were all perfectly out in the open for people to see. It's worth pointing out that Keir Starmer has been asked about this before and, again, was very cagey the last time as well and refused to be drawn on it. Again, having just appointed him, it was clear that these relationships were known to the public and he still tried to downplay it.
On Peter Mandelson, look, and I do try to give pretty full answers in these sessions, I don't know any more than you do. And therefore, there's not really much I can add to what you already know, I'm afraid. And, that's simply the state of the affairs. Thank you, Jim. I've got Mark.
Literally just completely refusing to actually engage with the reality of the problem there. This was before the election. At least Sky News were willing to try and question him on these relationships before we tried to get him elected. Obviously, Peston was posting a bunch of the photos from the Wall Street Journal leak, and yet this was nothing that was being questioned of the reality of what Labour would be like when they're in government, given how close Starmer was to Mandelson pre-election. And it's just only come open now that he's the ambassador to the United States. Just the yum yum quote, honestly, it's gonna never leave my brain, honestly, chat. I can't believe I've had my brain ruined by this. So this is another point brought up by Matt Kennard here. This is quite a while back now. This is from January. Lord Mandelson stayed at Epstein's townhouse in Manhattan in June 2009 whilst he was a Labour minister and Epstein was in prison for sexually abusing children. Yep, literally, emails indicate the business secretary stayed at his house whilst he was in prison. The extent of Jeffrey Epstein's contact with former UK Cabinet Minister Lord Peter Mandelson is laid bare in a newly released report that describes repeated meetings between the disgraced financier and the politician who he knew as PT. I think it's worth finishing this by checking out the disparate nature of the questioning of these things when you look at the thing that Corbyn got cancelled for was for pronouncing Jeffrey Epstein's name incorrectly, calling him Epstein, because that's how it'd be pronounced in using the German pronunciation. It's a German word. It's been anglicised to be to Epstein, right? He was cancelled for this. Oh, it's anti-Semitic for you calling him Jeffrey Epstein. Like, you're trying to accentuate his Jewishness or some shit like that, right? Really kind of bullshit concocted nonsense. And yet, the full links between Mandelson and Epstein had been known for ages. And it was barely questioned at all. And Starmer just kind of glided into government whilst only being challenged, if I can remember, just that one time that we just watched there. And then all of this coming out now as well. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.